6 years after my wife left me for wealthy developer Victor Langford, I walked into the signing dinner for his $70 million waterfront hotel wearing the same plain suit she once mocked. Elaine smiled and told Victor the first was probably looking for work. Then the buyer stood, shook my hand and announced, "Meet Samuel Carter, our chairman and largest shareholder." Victor's face went white, but before anyone could speak, my daughter slipped me a sealed safety report. A major storm was hours away, the hotel was full, and the last page carried Victor's signature beneath 6 words, "Remove this before the buyer sees it." Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and subscribe if you believe a person's worth should never be measured by the size of a bank account. My name is Samuel Carter. I was 58 when my former wife saw me enter the signing dinner for Victor Langford's $70 million waterfront hotel. I wore a plain navy suit, the same one I had owned for years, and arrived without a driver or an assistant. Elaine looked me over and gave Victor a small smile. She believed I had come hoping to find work. 6 years earlier, she had divorced me because she thought my business would never become anything. Now she stood beside one of the richest developers in the city, while I appeared to be the same stubborn man she had left behind. I did not correct her. The dinner was not about our failed marriage, and I had no interest in proving my value through a public scene. Within minutes, however, Victor would learn why everyone from the buyer's side had been waiting for me. I had co-founded a small real estate investment company with Naomi Brooks during the final 9 years of my marriage. Back then, we worked from 2 rented rooms above a hardware store. Naomi found investors while I studied failing properties that could be repaired and brought back to life. We earned little during the first years. I used most of my savings to keep the company open and often came home after midnight carrying another folder of deals that had gone nowhere. Elaine had once believed in me, but unpaid bills and broken promises slowly wore that belief away. I missed dinners, postponed vacations, and told her each new project might finally change everything. When Victor entered her life, he already owned office towers, restaurants, and a glass house overlooking the river. He represented the security I could not offer. Elaine asked for a divorce after 23 years of marriage. She did not steal my company or demand a cruel settlement. She simply told me she could no longer build her future around hope. What she never learned was that our hardest deal succeeded 3 months after she left. That deal saved the company. Naomi and I bought a neglected group of senior living buildings, repaired them without forcing out the residents, and sold part of the portfolio to a pension fund. We used the profit to grow, brought in experienced managers, and renamed the company Harbor Point Capital after merging with another private firm. Naomi became chief executive and the public face of our work. I became chairman, led the investment committee, and remained our largest shareholder. I preferred reviewing projects to giving interviews, so my photograph appeared on no billboards and very few business pages. I never hid the turnaround from Elaine. She stopped asking about my life, and I respected the distance she wanted. Our daughter Rachel knew the truth, but I asked her never to use my position to embarrass her mother. Rachel was 29 and had built her own career as a structural engineer. She worked hard enough that most people at Langford Development did not know her father had any connection to Harbor Point. That separation protected her independence, until Victor's hotel placed all of us inside the same deal. Victor's waterfront hotel was called the Langford Meridian. It had 300 rooms, a ballroom, 2 restaurants, and a long glass entrance facing the harbor. From the outside, it looked like the proudest project of his career. Behind the polished walls, Victor's company carried heavy debt from 2 failed developments. His largest lender had given him until Friday to repay a major loan or surrender control of the hotel. Harbor Point offered $70 million for the property, enough to pay the secured debt, protect the hotel staff, and leave Victor with money to rebuild his company. Naomi led the negotiations because that was her job. I reviewed the numbers and approved the final offer as chairman. Victor saw Naomi's name on every meeting schedule and assumed she alone controlled the buyer. He never asked who chaired the investment committee or why our final approval required one more signature. The dinner was meant to celebrate before closing the next morning. If the sale failed, Victor's lender could take the hotel before the weekend ended. When I entered the ballroom, Elaine was wearing a blue evening dress and standing beside Victor near the buyer's table. Surprise crossed her face before she covered it with a polite smile. She asked whether Rachel had invited me. I said Harbor Point had. Victor shook my hand with the distracted manner of a man greeting someone he considered unimportant. He remembered that I had once worked in property investment and said his company might need a site manager after the sale. Elaine touched his arm and told him not to discuss employment during dinner. Her attempt to protect me from embarrassment felt worse than his offer. Victor then asked whether my small investment office had survived. I answered that it had changed considerably. He smiled and said most small firms either changed or disappeared. Several executives heard him, but I refused to turn the signing into a contest. I took the empty chair beside Naomi. Victor assumed she was being courteous to an older guest. He had no idea that she had delayed the opening toast because the buyer could not approve the deal without me. Naomi waited until everyone was seated, then stepped to the microphone. She thanked Victor's team, the hotel staff, and the lawyers who had worked on the purchase. Victor relaxed as she spoke, already enjoying the relief that $70 million would bring. Then Naomi turned toward me. "Before we continue," she said, "I want to introduce Samuel Carter, chairman of Harbor Point Capital, head of our investment committee, and our largest shareholder." The room changed in an instant. Victor's smile disappeared. Elaine stared from Naomi to me as if she were trying to fit two different lives together. The plain suit, old car, and struggling office she remembered no longer told the whole story. Victor asked why my position had never been mentioned. Naomi replied that Harbor Point's leadership was listed in the private deal documents his lawyers received weeks earlier. He had simply allowed others to read them for him. She invited me to say a few words, but before I could stand, Rachel appeared beside my chair and pressed a folded note into my hand. It contained only 4 words: "Do not sign anything." Rachel asked me to meet her in the corridor outside the ballroom. Her hands shook as she opened a thick envelope hidden inside her engineering portfolio. She explained that an independent marine engineering firm had inspected the hotel's seawall 4 months earlier. The steel anchors beneath the east section were badly corroded, and water had opened gaps behind the retaining wall. Under normal conditions, repairs could be planned without closing the hotel. A strong storm surge, however, could force water into the service basement and weaken the ground below the east wing. The original engineers recommended immediate reinforcement and temporary limits on occupancy until the work was complete. Rachel had helped collect measurements, but when the final sale records were prepared, the warning disappeared. Victor told the team that a newer inspection had cleared the wall. Rachel had searched for that newer report and found none. A major coastal storm was expected to reach the city the following evening. The hotel was already filling with guests for a charity weekend, and Victor still planned to close the sale in the morning. I asked why she had waited until the dinner. Rachel said she first believed the missing report was an office mistake. That afternoon, she found the original inside an archived project folder along with instructions showing it had been removed on purpose. She had copied everything before her access to the folder was blocked. I returned to the ballroom with Rachel and gave the envelope to Naomi. Victor was lifting a glass, ready to toast the sale that would save his company. Elaine watched me with new questions in her eyes, but none of them mattered beside the lives inside that hotel. Naomi read the first page and stopped the waiter from pouring the champagne. The report carried photographs, measurements, and the engineer's warning about the approaching storm. On the final page was an order to remove the report from the buyer's inspection package. Beneath that order sat Victor Langford's signature and 6 words written in his own hand: "Remove this before the buyer sees it." Naomi closed the report and told the waiter to remove the champagne. She announced that Harbor Point would not sign until independent engineers checked the seawall warning. Victor tried to laugh it off. He called the document an early draft based on incomplete testing and claimed a later review had cleared the hotel. I asked him to produce it. He said it was stored with thousands of project files and could be delivered in the morning. That was not good enough with a storm approaching. Our contract gave Harbor Point the right to inspect any condition affecting safety or value, so I ordered an emergency inspection. Victor reminded everyone that his lender's deadline was Friday and said a delay could destroy the sale. I answered that hiding a safety report had already endangered it. Elaine stood beside him, watching her celebration turn into an investigation. The chairman's introduction had surprised her, but the paper in Naomi's hands frightened Victor far more. Victor turned on Rachel. He accused her of stealing company files and betraying every engineer beside her. Rachel said she copied a safety record because its warning had been removed from the buyer's inspection package. The marine engineers delivered their report 4 months earlier. 2 days later, Victor called a meeting with the project director, legal counsel, and engineering team. He ordered them to label the report preliminary, remove it from the sale folder, and wait for repairs before requesting another inspection. The repairs never began. Rachel had written notes and saved an email from the project director confirming Victor's order. Victor denied it. He said Rachel misunderstood a discussion about avoiding alarm and damaged both companies to impress her father. Rachel's face reddened, but she did not step back. She placed the email beside the report and asked Victor to show everyone the replacement inspection. He had nothing to offer. Instead, he reached for his phone and began turning the person who found the danger into the accused. Within 15 minutes, Rachel received an email suspending her for removing confidential material. Victor's lawyer warned that the company might report her to the state engineering board and sue if the sale collapsed. The threat was meant to silence her before the inspectors arrived. Elaine pulled me aside and asked whether I could continue the sale while repairs were discussed. She said Victor employed hundreds of people and a failed closing could cost jobs. I reminded her that hundreds of guests would be inside the hotel during the storm. Elaine insisted Victor would never knowingly risk lives. I asked whether she had read his signed order. She lowered her eyes and said people made poor choices when everything they built was about to disappear. That was the first time she admitted Victor's finances were worse than he had told the public. When I refused to restart the signing, Victor entered and told Elaine to make me understand what my anger would cost. He was willing to place my former wife between us, but using Rachel's future was something else entirely. The Langford Meridian was preparing for a charity weekend expected to bring more than 400 guests, donors and staff into the ballroom. Nearly 280 rooms were occupied. Hotel manager Teresa Bell had not seen the seawall report. When Naomi showed her, Teresa asked Victor whether she should close the east wing. Victor said no. He argued that forecasts changed every few hours, and closing part of the hotel would create panic before anyone knew there was a real problem. The latest report predicted heavy rain, strong coastal wind, and a storm surge the next evening. Harbor Point's engineers could arrive before midnight, but Victor remained the owner and controlled operations. I could pause the purchase, but I could not order guests from property we did not own. I asked Teresa to prepare an evacuation plan and told Naomi to notify our insurer and lawyers. If you believe no business deal is worth risking a life, write safety first in the comments. By then, Victor was preparing a story in which safety was only an excuse for revenge. 2 independent engineers arrived at 11:40 with ground radar, corrosion meters, and the original construction plans. Victor allowed access because refusing would violate the purchase contract. I followed them into the service basement with Naomi, Rachel, and Teresa. Salt water had left pale marks along the concrete wall. Several floor drains were running even though the rain had not begun, and one pump produced a grinding sound before shutting down. The lead engineer, Dr. Lena Ortiz, tested the steel anchors beneath the east section. Some had lost nearly half their expected strength. Radar showed empty spaces where moving water had washed soil from behind the seawall. Lena said the hotel was not in immediate danger during normal weather, but the approaching surge could push water through the weakened section. Flooding might disable electrical equipment in the basement and damage the ground supporting the east wing. Victor seized on the words, "not in immediate danger." Lena answered that a storm warning changed the risk and recommended closing the east wing until temporary supports and pumps were installed. Then she pointed toward a sealed maintenance door and said the most serious evidence was probably on the other side. Behind the door, the engineers found a narrow inspection passage that should have been checked every month. Rust covered the lower bolts, and fresh sealant had been spread across several cracks without any repair record. Someone had hidden damage that remained visible beneath the new coating. Rachel recognized the contractor's label on the empty sealant containers. Victor had hired that contractor shortly after receiving the first report. Lena photographed everything and asked Victor for the repair invoices. He said his maintenance director handled minor work and again denied knowing the condition was serious. Rachel produced an email in which Victor told that same director to make the wall presentable until closing. Victor stepped toward her and warned that no respected developer would employ an engineer who stole records and betrayed her own firm. I moved between them and told him every future conversation with Rachel would go through counsel. He answered that my protection could not save her license once the sale failed. Rachel looked at me and said she would rather lose her job than stay silent while guests slept above that wall. Her courage made the choice clearer, but it did not make the cost smaller. At 2 in the morning, Lena delivered her first written findings. She recommended removing guests from the east wing, closing the basement service area, and placing emergency pumps before the storm arrived. Permanent repairs would take months and cost several $1 million. Naomi gathered Harbor Point's investment committee by video. Some members wanted to close the purchase with part of the price held for repairs. They argued that Harbor Point had already committed millions in deposits, legal fees, and financing. and Victor could sue if we walked away. Others said his failure to disclose the report allowed us to stop. Our $70 million investment would be tied up either way. Closing meant accepting a damaged property, while refusing meant a long fight over the contract and our deposit. I listened, then looked through the conference room window at Rachel helping Teresa mark occupied rooms on an evacuation list. Investors could recover money. A guest trapped in a flooded corridor could not recover lost time. I told Naomi I would not approve the closing until the city reviewed the danger and every exposed guest was protected. Naomi warned me that contacting city officials would almost certainly end the morning closing. Victor's lender could take control, Harbor Point's deposit might remain frozen, and the board would have to explain why its chairman stopped the largest purchase of the year hours before signing. I said we would explain with the truth. I asked Rebecca to prepare the notice pausing the sale and reached for the phone to contact the building department. Before I could make the call, Naomi's laptop sounded with an urgent message from our board secretary. Victor had sent the directors a collection of private emails. The selected lines made it appear that months earlier I had planned to use my history with Elaine to pressure Victor, damage his company, and force down the hotel's price. Naomi read the first page, then turned the screen toward me. A special board meeting had been called for 7 that morning, and until it ended, several directors wanted my authority over the deal suspended. The storm was moving faster, the hotel remained full, and Victor had just made Harbor Point's own board question whether its chairman was trying to save lives or settle an old score. I did not wait for the special board meeting to protect Victor's deadline. Before sunrise, I instructed Rebecca to send formal notice that Harbor Point was pausing the closing under the safety and disclosure clauses in our contract. Naomi supported the notice as chief executive, which meant it remained valid even if the board later suspended me. I then gave Dr. Lena Ortiz's findings, Rachel's copied report, and the photographs from the inspection passage to the city building department and fire marshal. At 7, I joined Harbor Point's directors by video from the hotel conference room. Victor's selected emails filled their screens. One line from me said, "Pressure from his lender may give us room to lower the price." Another said, "Victor cares more about appearance than what sits beneath it." Read alone, they sounded personal and planned. I explained that the first came from a normal market review written before Harbor Point approached Victor. The second referred to a different office project with hidden drainage damage. Several directors listened, but others saw a chairman with an ex-wife standing beside the seller. Victor had created doubt, and doubt was all he needed while the storm moved closer. Board member Thomas Avery asked me to step away from the deal until the emails were reviewed. I said I would remove myself from any future price negotiation, but I would not withdraw the safety evidence or restart the closing. Naomi reminded the board that independent engineers, not I, had measured the corroded anchors and missing soil. She also told them Victor could have ended the concern at any time by producing the later inspection he claimed existed. He still had not done so. After 40 minutes, the board voted to keep the purchase paused while allowing a committee without me to review the price and contract. They did not suspend me as chairman, but they restricted my authority over the sale. Victor treated that as a victory and told local reporters that Harbor Point's own directors doubted my motives. He claimed Rachel and I had built a false emergency to punish him and reduce the price. By 8:15, his version was spreading online. At 8:20, 3 city vehicles stopped outside the hotel. Victor had influenced a boardroom, but he could not prevent inspectors from opening the seawall door. The city team reviewed the basement, pump room, and inspection passage with Lena. Victor followed them, repeating that the wall had stood safely for decades. Rachel stayed near Teresa because her company access had been disabled. While the officials worked, she called the marine engineering firm that produced the first report. Its records manager found the original file in a protected archive. Unlike Rachel's copy, this version carried a digital seal showing when it was created, who opened it, and whether anything had been changed. The audit history showed that Victor viewed the report the day it arrived. It also contained his signed instruction to remove the warning from the sale package until the wall looked presentable. A later entry showed someone from Langford Development tried to delete the file, but the protected archive kept the original. Rachel asked the firm to send certified copies directly to the city and Harbor Point's board. The records manager agreed after receiving a legal preservation request from Rebecca. Victor could call Rachel's papers stolen or altered. He could not explain away a sealed record stored on another company's server. By late morning, the storm had strengthened and was expected to push the highest surge into the harbor shortly after midnight. The city building commissioner ordered the east wing closed at once and gave Teresa 3 hours to move every guest. The ballroom charity event was canceled. Victor protested that only the lower level was threatened, but the fire marshal said a flooded electrical room could remove lights, elevators, and alarms from the entire hotel. Teresa called nearby hotels, arranged buses, and assigned staff to every floor. Some guests complained when told to pack. Others became frightened after seeing news crews outside. Rachel helped an elderly couple carry medicine and 2 small suitcases from the 12th floor. Elaine joined the staff at the front desk, calling guests who were away from their rooms. Victor stood near the entrance arguing with his lender and lawyers while the building emptied around him. At 4 in the afternoon, the final family boarded a bus. The staff shut down the east wing power, moved equipment above the basement, and left except for the emergency crew. For the first time since the report appeared, no one remained above the weakened section. Rain struck the windows before sunset. From the city's emergency command room across the street, we watched cameras placed in the empty service level. Water began entering through small cracks around 10:30. The temporary pumps handled it at first, but the harbor continued rising. At 12:40, one camera shook and a line opened across the concrete wall. Lena told the emergency crew to stay outside. Minutes later, part of the old seawall shifted toward the basement. Water burst through the inspection passage, flooded the service level, and knocked out the remaining basement power. The ground beneath a storage area dropped several inches, and tiles cracked inside 2 empty rooms in the east wing. No guest, hotel worker, or emergency responder was hurt. Had the charity event continued, staff would have been using that basement corridor when the wall opened. Rachel watched the dark camera feed with both hands pressed together. I put my arm around her and said the empty building was proof that speaking up had mattered. The seawall failure did not create the truth. It exposed how close Victor had brought hundreds of people to disaster. By morning, no one on Harbor Point's board was asking whether the danger had been invented. The city released a short statement confirming that the failure matched the warnings in the original engineering report. Naomi sent the directors the certified digital file, Victor's signed removal order, and the full email conversations he had shortened. In context, my messages showed ordinary price analysis and concern about unrelated construction problems. The board ended the restriction on my authority and issued a statement supporting the decision to halt the closing. Rachel's employer withdrew its threat to report her engineering license after Rebecca warned that punishing her for providing safety evidence could become illegal retaliation. Victor still insisted he had expected repairs before the storm, but his own dates defeated him. He received the report 4 months earlier, ordered cosmetic work, and scheduled a crowded weekend without completing structural repairs. Saving the sale had become more important to him than admitting what the hotel needed. His lenders now faced a damaged property, a missed repayment deadline, and loan documents that claimed every serious defect had been disclosed. Victor's main lender moved first. Its lawyers filed an emergency request to place the Langford Meridian under an independent receiver, arguing that Victor had hidden a major defect, misled the buyer, and endangered the property securing their loan. 2 smaller lenders joined the request. At the hearing on Monday, the judge reviewed the city report, Victor's signed order, and his statements in the sale documents. Victor's lawyer argued that court supervision would destroy his company and remove any chance of repairing the hotel. The judge answered that leaving him in control created the greater risk. She appointed an experienced hotel receiver to protect the building, preserve jobs, and manage all money connected to the property. Victor could no longer sell, borrow against, or operate the hotel without approval. Elaine sat behind him as the order was read. She looked at Rachel rather than me. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the man she had chosen for security had risked her daughter's career to protect an image of success. After the hearing, Victor walked past us without speaking. Elaine remained in the corridor and apologized to Rachel for asking her to doubt what she had seen. Rachel accepted the apology, but said trust would require time. I did not use the moment to remind Elaine why our marriage ended. The storm had already stripped away enough illusions. That afternoon, the receiver contacted Naomi. Engineers believed the hotel could be repaired, the staff wanted to return, and Victor's lenders still needed a buyer. Harbor Point's $70 million offer was the only fully financed proposal ready to proceed, but the original contract could not simply be revived. Any new agreement would need money held for repairs, protection for employees, and a full investigation into Victor's disclosures. The receiver asked our board to answer by noon the next day. I had stopped the sale to save the people inside the hotel. Now the court wanted to know whether I was willing to buy the damaged property and finish the deal that could save everyone except Victor. The receiver gave Harbor Point 24 hours to confirm whether our offer still stood. I removed myself from the price discussion because Victor had already tried to make the deal look personal. Naomi led a new review with directors who had no connection to my marriage, and Dr. Lena Ortiz provided updated repair estimates. The numbers showed that the Langford Meridian could survive, but only if the seawall, pumps, and damaged service level were repaired before reopening. Walking away would protect Harbor Point from immediate risk, yet it would leave the hotel closed, its employees uncertain, and Victor's lenders fighting over a property losing value each day. Naomi proposed keeping the $70 million price while changing where the money went. $44 million would repay the senior lender, $10 million would enter a protected repair account, $6 million would cover taxes, unpaid suppliers, and employee obligations. The remaining $10 million would stay under court control while fraud claims and junior debts were reviewed. Victor would receive no personal payment at closing. The board approved the structure without my vote, but one question remained. Would the court accept a deal that saved the hotel while leaving its former owner with nothing he could touch? The judge reviewed the agreement 2 days later. The receiver supported it because Harbor Point promised to keep every permanent hotel employee who wished to return, continue their health coverage during repairs, and give local contractors a fair chance to bid on the work. Victor objected through his lawyer. He said the escrow accounts were designed to punish him and that part of the sale price belonged directly to his company. The lenders answered that his company had already pledged the hotel and its sale proceeds as security. The hidden report and missed loan deadline gave them the right to demand court protection. Judge Marlowe approved the purchase after confirming that no money would be released without records and independent oversight. Harbor Point paid $70 million, but every dollar followed the court's written order. Naomi signed as chief executive. The receiver signed for the property. I signed only after the independent committee confirmed the terms were fair. When the documents were complete, the Langford Meridian belonged to Harbor Point. The sale Victor tried to protect through deception closed only after control had been taken from him. Victor's problems did not end with losing the hotel. The city referred the hidden safety report to prosecutors and the state licensing board. His lenders filed claims accusing him of making false statements in the loan and sale documents. The contractor who spread sealant over the cracks agreed to cooperate and produced messages showing Victor had ordered cosmetic work instead of structural repairs. Several weeks later, Victor admitted in a sworn settlement that he knew the original report had not been replaced by a safer inspection. The agreement did not settle the criminal investigation, but it prevented him from denying the facts in the civil cases. His development license was suspended pending a full hearing, and his remaining business accounts came under financial review. I did not celebrate. Victor had employees, investors, and relatives who would also feel the damage caused by his choices. Still, refusing to enjoy his fall did not mean shielding him from it. For years he had treated appearance as proof of strength. Now every polished image he created was being tested against records he could not erase. Rachel's position was resolved differently. Harbor Point's board reviewed the complete messages Victor had circulated and formally cleared me of using the acquisition for revenge. The directors also stated that Rachel's report, not my personal history, caused the closing to stop. The State Engineering Board dismissed Langford Development's complaint against her after examining the sealed digital file and the city's findings. Rachel did not return to Victor's company. The independent marine engineering firm that preserved the original report offered her a position on its repair team. To avoid any conflict with me, she reported to Lena, while the court-appointed inspector reviewed every major decision. Rachel accepted because she wanted to repair the place she had helped protect. During the first weeks, some workers treated her like the chairman's daughter. That changed when she spent cold mornings inside the damaged service level checking measurements beside them. She never asked me to intervene, and I never did. Her reputation recovered because the evidence supported her, and because she continued doing the work after the attention faded. Elaine asked to meet me after she moved out of Victor's river house. We sat in a small cafe we had visited when Rachel was young. She did not ask about my company or the value of my shares. She admitted that when our marriage became difficult, she began measuring every man by what he could provide immediately. Victor's buildings, cars, and confidence looked like safety. My late nights, failed deals, and uncertain promises looked like a future that might never arrive. Elaine said she had confused visible wealth with character and quick success with reliability. I accepted my part as well. I had expected her to keep believing while I repeatedly placed the business ahead of our marriage, but leaving was one choice. Helping Victor dismiss Rachel's warning was another. Elaine apologized for asking our daughter to stay silent and for assuming my decision came from jealousy. Then she asked whether the years apart had changed enough for us to try again. That was the answer no business contract could give her. I told Elaine I forgave her for leaving, but I would not rebuild our marriage. Too much had happened, and neither of us was the person the other remembered. I would always treat her with respect as Rachel's mother, yet respect did not require another chance. Elaine said Victor's legal bills and frozen business interests had left her unsure where she would live. I gave her the number of a reputable attorney and told her to protect whatever property legally belonged to her. I did not offer Harbor Point's money, a house, or influence over Victor's case. Rescuing her from every result of the life she chose would not be kindness. It would keep her from building a life based on her own decisions. She nodded, hurt but not angry. Before leaving, she said she finally understood that my plain suit had never meant I lacked value. I answered that becoming wealthy had not created my value either. Money had only revealed which people saw me clearly before they knew what I owned. Repairs took 9 months. Engineers rebuilt the failed seawall with deeper anchors, replaced the basement pumps, and moved critical electrical systems above the flood level. The repair account paid only documented costs, and unused money remained under the judge's supervision for creditor claims. Teresa helped Harbor Point retain most of the original hotel staff. Workers received training for the new emergency systems, and the city inspected each stage before approving the reopening. Victor eventually faced formal fraud charges based on the hidden report and false statements. The court, not Harbor Point, would decide his punishment. Elaine found a modest apartment and began volunteering with the charity whose canceled event had brought everyone to the hotel. Rachel stayed with the engineering firm after construction ended. On the morning of the reopening, she stood beside me near the new seawall as families and former employees gathered at the entrance. Naomi asked whether I wanted to address the reporters as chairman. I said there was someone else whose courage mattered more. Rachel resisted when I invited her forward, but the hotel workers began applauding before she reached the microphone. I told them that titles could authorize a purchase, but they could not make a person speak when silence was easier. Becoming chairman was not the achievement that made me proudest. Raising a daughter who risked her career to protect strangers meant more than every building Harbor Point owned. Rachel hugged me, then thanked the engineers, Teresa, and the city teams who moved hundreds of people before the storm. No plaque carried my name, and I wanted none. The first guests entered through the glass doors while sunlight crossed the repaired harbor wall. Children ran toward the windows, staff returned to their stations, and the elevators rose safely above a dry service level. The truth had saved a hotel, protected jobs, cleared 2 reputations, and prevented a crowded building from becoming a tragedy. It had also taught me that success is not proved when someone introduces you as chairman. It is proved when you have the power to protect yourself and choose to protect others instead. If you believe courage and integrity deserve to be remembered, subscribe and stay with us for more stories where the truth arrives just in time and changes everything.